Professionally Speaking TV. I'm Randall Craig, your host, and today we're joined by Greg Pollock, President and CEO of Advocis, which is the Financial Advisors Association of Canada. He's the Chief Operating Officer of the Institute, which is a leading destination for education for advisors. Those are a lot of words. Advocis, what is it really about?
So Advocis is an association of financial advisors and planners here in Canada. These are individuals who have backgrounds in securities, in mutual funds, in insurance, group pension work, and group health work. And we advocate on behalf of these individuals and their clients, and frankly, on behalf of all financial advisors and planners in the country, even if they're not a member of the association.
The number of people in your number of members you have?
Roughly 12,000.
Roughly 12,000.
Yeah.
Now, you know, in the olden days, we talked about the 4 pillars of financial services: trust companies and banks and brokerages and insurance companies. And one of the interesting things, at least as an outsider, is how completely separated they were past tense.
Right.
You grew out of which pillar?
We grew out of the insurance pillar, really, and now the securities funds pillar is where we're placed.
So one of the questions that I would have, and probably not too different from a lot of the investing public, is there competition amongst advisors between, or based on where they come from? People that come from the wealth management space of banks and trust companies, for example, have got a very different worldview, for example, than people that come from the insurance space.
Absolutely, and there is definitely choice out there. There is competition out there, and it's something, frankly, Randall, that we encourage. We believe that consumers should have a variety of models to choose from, should have access to different types of financial advisors, access to individuals with different specializations. And frankly, we have some concerns that some of the direction that the regulators are going in the country here may reduce that choice.
How so?
Well, for example, they want to, just recently, the Canadian Securities Administrators circulated a paper on embedded compensation, third-party compensation when it comes to mutual fund fees. And what they've suggested is that that kind of structure be banned in the country.
So what we're talking about here is the management expense ratio, the commissions and the management fees that the mutual funds get charged by the portfolio managers. Part of that be sent to the salespeople or not?
Right, right. And so the Canadian Securities Administrators is examining an approach where we would have a fee-only basis, so that as a client, one would pay a fee regardless of whether you bought, didn't buy, whatever kind of advice that advisor was providing. And today, probably about 90%, 95% of the funds products that are sold out there have this kind of commission arrangement. Roughly about 1% for the financial advisors themselves. I'm not including the percent that goes to the portfolio manager or to the mutual fund company.
For the sales and distribution system.
Right. Yeah. So it's roughly about 1%, and we feel that that's a very effective way to bring in the small consumer into the mutual fund environment. If you're going to ask individuals to write a sizable check up front, whether it's $300, $500, it depends on what it's for. I think it's going to reduce the number of Canadians that actually purchase these kinds of products. And at the end of the day, the evidence is showing that Canadians are going to will have to become more self-reliant when it comes to their financial health. So we want to encourage people investing, not discourage people from investing.
So one of the questions, is, okay, so that's what you say. What is the evidence? For example, in other countries, have they made this change one way or the other? Do we have some experience to say, well, yes, if we make this change, all of the financial advisors will flee because there's no reason for them to be there, they're not being paid, or gee, there's been no change? Like, where else does this happen?
So there have been recent changes in the UK and in Australia. And I want to emphasize that it's been recent. So, we don't have a lot of data yet to call on to really measure, has this had an effect on the investing public or not? Are there unintended consequences that the regulators, perhaps legislators, didn't anticipate? But as we look at the early data, and I want to emphasize it is early, in fairness to everyone, it appears that a number of advisors have left the business. For example, and I'm going, just from some recent data out of the UK, between December 2011, December 2012, so this is when the announcement was made that the system was going to change, 40,000, do I have 40? I think that's the number. Is it 40%? I'd have to check that, but about 40,000 advisors in the bank channel left the advice industry in the UK. And whether it's 40,000, 40%, it was still a significant number of advisors, and a number of independents as well. Whether they'll return or not, I don't know. I saw a recent report just this last few weeks that says that there is a slow return of some of these independents back into the advice channel, but nothing like the numbers that have left. So if these large numbers of individuals have left, it means that many Brits are not accessing financial advice. They're relying on their own devices to solve their financial challenges. And we think at the end of the day that's problematic, because in Canada here there's been a recent study released by an organization known as Serrano. It's a research firm out of the Montreal area, and I think they've done the most comprehensive study to date on the relationship between the financial advice by a financial advisor and the wealth of Canadians. They looked at 50 different variables and separated out all the variables, trying to identify what effect does the actual advice have on one's wealth. And they've demonstrated that financial advice can increase financial wealth 2 to 3 times. That's quite significant for an investor. So if we're restricting the amount of financial advice by putting in place certain models or structures that let's say regulators think are the way to go, then we believe at the end of the day Canadians are going to be worse off.
Now, regulators aren't stupid people. They make regulations to achieve certain policy objectives. Are you saying that they've totally neglected this particular factor, or that others superseded it for the, quote, public good?
Well, first of all, I want to emphasize that they haven't made up their mind as to which direction they are going in. They are consulting on this issue at the present time. So that, in fairness to the regulators, and they've been very clear about that. They're saying, look, we are consulting. I think the reason they're doing this is because they've looked, to their friends in the UK and to their friends in Australia, and they've seen these changes. And I think they're saying to themselves, shouldn't we be doing that in Canada? And so I see no problem with them asking that kind of question. We're saying, be careful what you ask for. Make sure that you understand what the consequences of these decisions are. And frankly, I think they're listening to that. Does that mean they're going to change their mind and say maybe not move down a particular path? I can't say for certain, but they have not made up their mind at this point in time. They're continuing to, as they say, consult on the issue.
Now, one of the interesting things about this particular industry, insurance, mutual fund sales, it's very lucrative. The commissions are seemingly high, and very often with trailing commissions, they tend to go on for quite a bit. So it's very easy for somebody to get into the business as an advisor. I know that you do a number of certification programs to make sure that education is primary, etc. But are we at a point right now where the commissions are so lucrative that there's a number of people who've chosen this particular path who probably shouldn't be in the business?
Well, first of all, let me challenge you a little bit on the business being lucrative, because I would suggest that it's a fairly challenging business to get into. My son entered the business a couple of years ago. So he's telling me all of the compliance costs that he has to deal with, all of the office costs he has to deal with, all the overhead costs he has to deal with. He's running a business.
Sure.
So he's got an assistant. He's got has to have space somewhere to locate to work. So you have to pay all those costs related to space. You've got telecommunications, whether it's the telephone or iPhones or Blackberries or whatever it might be. You have compliance costs. You have insurance costs. You have to have professional liability insurance in the event that you make errors in terms of advising these clients. So let's say that he's in his early 30s, so he's probably going to naturally be attracted to a market of individuals of his sort of cohorts out there. And so how much money do they have to invest? So one of them says, well, look, I want to invest $10,000 in some funds. So he's going to draw 1% on that $10,000. That's $100. Now, I don't think that's a huge fee, quite frankly, because really, what did it take to get that sale? Well, he had to probably sit down with them, talk a little bit about their needs. What is it that they're planning to do financially over the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 and 50 years, if you want. So whether it's planning for a family, thinking about maybe leaving the apartment, purchasing a home, where are your car payments at? Have you paid off all of your university debts at this point in time? I have no idea how long he would have spent with that kind of client, but it's possible he might have spent an hour or two or three for $100. Well, clearly you can't exist on that. Not if you have all those overhead costs to make, expenses to pay. So what he's, I would imagine, wanting to do is to establish them as a client for the longer term. So, maybe you're buying some funds today, but perhaps, as we look at your needs, you'll want to buy some insurance products tomorrow. You're an independent professional, you're a chartered accountant, you're running your own little business, and, do you have disability insurance? What happens if you become disabled? What impact will that have on you? Do you have dependents, on your dependents? On other costs that you have to meet. If you have a mortgage, how are you going to pay the mortgage on your home? So, all of this needs analysis is very, very critical, to each and every one of those clients. So, in my view, financial advisors, there's a lot to the business. It's not an easy business. You have to find that market. You have to prospect, find clients, and then you got to keep them up to date. So you got to meet with them on a regular basis, whether it's every 6 months or a year. Are we meeting all of your needs? And frankly, if you've missed asking some crucial questions, this could make you liable for not, advice by omission, if you want. So again, that's very important as well. So I'm not convinced with your that it's all that easy to get into and that just anybody can do it. I think one has to be pretty talented in order to be in this business.
So for those, just following up, this is fascinating actually, for those getting into the business, what percentage stay after 3 years?
It's fairly low, actually. We're finding it's about 25, 28% that are in the business, year 4, let's say.
Yes.
So that's a pretty significant drop, and I suspect most of them are leaving because they're challenged by finding their natural market, their natural prospects, in order to establish them as clients. And if you have to continue to pay all those expenses and you can't find clients to help pay some of those expenses, then you're out of business. And it's a problem because it's a very necessary business for Canadians. A lot of Canadians don't even know that the business exists. They don't know that these opportunities for them financially, if you want, exist out there. And but we need people to help bring the story. The other thing is, maybe just related to that, is the whole training and education of these young advisors. It's very important that they become knowledgeable and very knowledgeable about the business. There's many, many products out there. And so there's the whole issue of succession planning. That is, those advisors today who are, more seasoned, they've been in the business 25 or 30 years, they want to think about transitioning their business. So how do they find these individuals, these younger individuals, and how do they train them? And who's going to pay for that? So there's a lot of challenging issues out there for the industry, and our association assists with many of the solutions to those kinds of challenges. It's not easy, but certainly we're very, very excited and pleased to be part of it.
So from thank you. From the investing public's perspective, somebody's got some money and they're trying to decide, gee, should they invest with an advisor from their bank? Gee, there's this, their stockbroker is knocking on their door saying, well, we can put together an appropriate investment strategy for you. Gee, they go to a Advocis member and do the investments with them. How does one choose?
Right. Good. Yeah. Great question. Actually, one has to do some homework first of all. And in fact, if you go to our website, the Advocis website, it actually has a series of questions and a series of small video kind of clips, 1 or 2 minutes each, on how to find a financial advisor, how to select a financial advisor. And there's a lot of crucial questions that you should be asking. And if you have advisors out there who are promising you some, let's say, consistent returns on your investment, and they're going to be pretty healthy returns. We're in a pretty tough environment today. We've been in a tough environment for several years now. So if someone's saying to you, gee, you know what, I can assure you that you're going to get 8% return on these investments over the next 5 years, that's a bit of a red flag. That's not really the way it works. The way it works is we sit down, we do a needs analysis, we look at the kinds of assets that you have to invest, and then we look at some possible methods and options for making those investments. And there are no guarantees in this business. Now, that's not totally true, because with respect to some forms of insurance, there are guarantees. But I find when I keep hearing about these Ponzi schemes and these other fraudulent activities that are going on out and around us, read about another one recently, that a lot of people were being made these ridiculous promises that just cannot be delivered. So one has to use their own instinct first of all.
Sure.
So they're their own best check first of all. But talk to your friends if they have some advisors. Ask them who they are. Are they satisfied? Could they if you have an advisor that you're thinking of looking at, are there a couple of people I could talk to who are clients of yours today, where I'd just like to interview them and get a sense of whether or not they're satisfied with the kind of work that you're doing on their behalf. So consumers have to do their own due diligence. I kind of chuckle a little bit because a lot of us will spend more time researching what new car to buy than we will what financial advisor to use, who perhaps is going to be advising us for the next 5, 10, 20 years.
So let me just, don't want to talk about cars so much in this interview,
Sure.
but still, you go to the Advocis website. It's advocis.ca. You could find that document of all those questions. It's a great document. You ask your friends. You do some reference checking, surely. But from a category perspective, why wouldn't you go, for example, directly to your stockbroker, your investment advisor attached there? Why wouldn't you go to the bank, for example, and their advisors? Why would somebody choose, for example, to go to an Advocis member?
Right. So let me be clear that advisors working in the banking channel, investment advisors working with securities dealers, a lot of very professional individuals. So from my point of view, the kinds of questions that you'll find on our website are the same kinds of questions You could ask of the bank advisor. You could ask of the investment advisor. And I think that the banks and the investment advisors and the independent financial advisors, most of whom are our kind of member, offer different services at different times to different kinds of clients. If you're looking just for a quick one-time purchase of a product, that's it. You don't want ongoing advice. You don't want someone overseeing your day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year investment strategy, insurance strategy, and so forth, then you can go to those sort of one-stop, one-time places and purchase that product. But I think if you're looking for a very long-term relationship, and that's what many of our members do, they develop these very long-term relationships, in fact even multi-generational relationships with their clients, then you likely want to look for someone who's going to be there for a while, and who is not just selling you this product today and then wishing you well and you both go on your way.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. We're talking with Greg Pollock, who's the president and CEO of Advocis, the Financial Advisors Association of Canada. Right after the break, we're going to talk a little bit about one of the other interesting problems in the field. What makes a financial advisor? In fact, what does the word financial advisor actually mean? Back in a second. We're back on Professionally Speaking TV. I'm Randall Craig, your host, and we're joined today by Greg Pollock. We've been talking a little bit about the world of advice, but one of the big questions has to be, what the heck does financial advisor actually mean? And I know you've looked at that particular question, and it's galling, I imagine, that anybody can call themselves a financial advisor.
Absolutely, Randall. We're certainly concerned about that. And there's so many individuals out there who profess to be financial advisors who really have little if no education, no licensing, no background at all to call themselves a financial advisor, other than perhaps dealing with their own personal financial situation. So we're calling for some standards around this, such that the title of financial advisor be restricted to certain individuals who hold certain credentials, who have certain educational background, who meet ongoing education standards, continuing education standards if you want, who carry appropriate professional liability insurance to protect their clients in the event of misadvice, and who are listed on a public register, so that the public can quickly determine, is this individual a bona fide financial advisor? What are their credentials? Have they had any complaints filed against them in the past that went to, say, discipline, and where their wrists were slapped, or maybe even their credentials suspended? Those kinds of questions need to be answered, and we've put a proposal out in front of the public to begin that discussion. Just to share it with you here, raising the professional bar is what it's entitled. Greater consumer protection through higher professional standards.
Yeah, and there's really very little that you could argue against this particular title. But let me ask about the title itself, financial advisor. Some may argue that that's a very generic title that can be used bona fide by, for example, people doing advice for mergers and acquisitions or corporate financial transactions.
Right.
Why not choose a title like personal financial advisor, or some way to limit the scope to stuff having to do with financial advice at the personal level?
Well, first of all, if you read through the proposal in detail, you'll notice that there are certain exclusions that we will support with respect to this proposal going forward. So, for example, if you're a chartered accountant today providing financial advice to corporate clients or to individual clients for that matter, you would be excluded from this proposal. If you're a lawyer, a lot of lawyers provide financial advice to their clients, whether, again, corporate or individual. If you're a lawyer providing that kind of advice, again, you would be excluded and would not have to conform to this proposal. So we have anticipated some of those suggestions. There may be others, and if there are others, then we can make refinements as we move along. I want to emphasize that, from our point of view, this is a proposal. We've put a lot of time into it. We've spent a couple of years speaking to individuals in industry and to the public about what does resonate, what would work, what seems to make sense. But we don't have the corner on all of the good ideas, and I'm sure there are others out there. So we'd certainly welcome those.
What has the feedback been?
Feedback's been very positive. It's almost like you've suggested, you can't really be against this kind of concept. You can't be against better standards and consumer protection. The challenge is in the details. There's a lot of players in the broad industry. Even on the regulatory side, for example, we have the insurance side of the industry being regulated by one set of regulators across the country, and then we have the security side of the industry being regulated by another group of regulators across the country. 13 in, if we add up all the jurisdictions, so 13 insurance regulators, 13 securities regulators. And then you have pension regulators who aren't necessarily the same individuals. So it gets very, very complex. And when you think about it, that we couldn't get last round at least a national securities regulator in place. And we're trying to bring together the insurance side of the equation, the security side of the equation, all under one umbrella called financial advisors. It's a tall order, but in principle, people like the concept. The legislators love the concept. Can we get the details done? It remains to be seen.
Now, interestingly, some people will say, well, aren't there a whole bunch of different certifications out there? Certified financial planner comes to mind. Gee, if people have these certifications, doesn't that address the issue of whether somebody has reached a certain standard, or must we put yet another layer on top of the pile? Yeah,
great question. And I think if you read the detail, what we're calling for is a proficiency standard, is a holding out standard. So today, as we said, there's no standard at all. I actually have a certified financial planning designation. Many others do not. They would call themselves financial planners or financial advisors or financial consultants, whatever it is they want to call themselves. And so we're saying we need to start somewhere. And that's the concept of sort of raising the bar. So we need to set a floor as to what kind of credential, perhaps designation, one would require in order to hold out as a financial advisor. And do we allow for a transition period? Do we allow for a 2 or 3 or 4 year period to allow individuals who don't have a designation to get up to that standard? The profession, once established, will set those standards. That's how we see this moving forward.
What's the biggest critique of the initiative?
I think is it just another layer of regulation. I mentioned earlier about all the compliance costs affiliated with this industry, and they are significant. So the question is this going to lead to greater costs? And if it is, let's say for the mutual fund manufacturers, if the people selling our funds are now going to have to pay an additional fee to somebody in order to do that, that's just going to be another thing that's going to cause them to say, maybe this is not the business I want to be in. So that's a bit of a challenge. But we don't believe in the long run that overall costs will go up. We believe that once established, the profession will set rules and standards that will eliminate some of the rulemaking and standards making that's happening through some of the other regulatory bodies across the country.
So when can we expect this to be passed by all of the different regulators, all of your competing associations who also have an important stake in the discussions, etc.
Right.
Where might the discussion go?
Well, first of all, it's a multi-year project. This is not something that's going to be accomplished next month or in the next 6 months. It's my belief that if we can find a province who would like to introduce legislation of this nature, allowing all stakeholders then to comment on it, that will be an excellent starting point. And we're hoping to achieve that within the next several months, to at least get that introduced in the legislature, get it out for comment, get it out for
Which
discussion.
legislature?
Well, we're speaking to a number of the legislatures currently in the country.
Raising the professional bar. That's a bit of a challenge. Talk to me for a minute about the challenge of, on one hand, advocating for and being the primary booster of financial professionals on one hand, yet also addressing issues of standards. So, for example, what happens when somebody doesn't reach a standard?
Right.
You know, in the medical world, there's the association and there's the registrar.
Right.
Very different roles between the two of them.
Right. So currently, just to share with you, and for people watching as well, because I think it's important that people know this, this is a voluntary organization, so one can belong, one cannot belong. It's up to them as to whether or not they want to belong to Advocis. But in fact, we receive complaints from members of the public when clients are dissatisfied with the kind of advice they've received from one of our members. And so when that occurs, we investigate that complaint, and if warranted, we refer that complaint to a disciplinary panel. And so this has happened in the past, and it goes to the disciplinary panel, and the panel hears the claim from the complainant, hears the response from the respondent, and they make a decision. And in some cases, that decision might be to modify the education program that this individual has been taking, or take additional education courses to bring them up to a more appropriate standard. You know, there's a number of remedies that panel can look at. The problem is, once that panel does that, if they suggest a remedy, that individual could simply say, well, you know what, I'm not interested in doing that, and so I'm going to relinquish my membership in this association, thank you so much, and they walk away. And that has happened as well. That's a major problem. So really, it's a voluntary organization, and in a sense, we don't have any teeth. We can't really help protect the consumer. And that's what a professional association does. It gives the public a place to lodge their complaints, to have their complaints heard expeditiously, and to have decisions made quickly as well. That's what we want to see have happen, and we think that's going to help greatly assist in terms of setting precedent and standard out there for all financial advisors.
So when you have a finding that's contrary to, in the eyes of the defendant,
right?
There are no legislative teeth. There's no referral to appropriate securities or insurance regulators. It's just...
There's none today, because we're a voluntary organization, because we have no legislative or regulatory mandate. We at the end of the day can't do a lot, other than encouraging perhaps that complainant to take their complaint elsewhere, and that has happened as well. And you know, individuals, when that has happened, have had licenses removed by regulators and so forth. But
so if I went to the Advocis website right now and I wanted to take a look at the disciplinary proceedings, or at least the results of the disciplinary proceedings, I'd be able to do that? You
wouldn't. You would see very broadly the number of cases we've looked at and that we've heard, but what you won't see are the detailed decisions. The reason you won't see the detailed decisions is because if, for example, we publish a detailed decision that, you know, affects the career of that now maybe former member, then that provides an opportunity for them to sue our association. It opens us up to liability. Again, we need that protection, that regulatory and legislative protection.
Is there not some middle ground, though? Is there not some middle ground where you can provide greater exposure, i.e. develop a bigger stick, and still, you know, and if somebody, for example, is, if you do damage somebody's career because they did unethical things, then to take your big stick and say, yes, sue us, we'll fight you, we're big.
Yeah,
we're much bigger than you.
Yeah, believe it or not, not really.
Really?
Not really. I mean, our own legal counsel says to us, that's a challenge. I'm with you. I think it should be out there. I think we need to be telling the investing public. Counsel's saying, and, you know, lawyers are lawyers, I guess, but they're saying that's going to open you up to all sorts of exposure. So that's why, you know, this proposal is so critical. It will allow us to do our job more effectively.
Interesting. Trends. Okay, beyond this particular initiative, biggest trends for the investment. And
sure. I think one of the major trends I'm seeing out there is the increasing longevity of Canadians. So if I'm living longer, I need more resources to keep me going. So the good news is I'm going to live longer. The bad news is I may run out of money to keep me going. So that's an issue. And then you align that with the governments in Canada really being challenged by the pension obligations that they have, the health care costs obligations that they have. These are not easy fiscal issues for these governments. So what are they going to do in the next 15 and 20 years as they wrestle with these issues? I know what the federal government has done with the OAS, for example. So what that really means is that individual Canadians are going to have to become more financially self-reliant. They're going to have to plan for themselves. And as I said, evidence shows that if you work with a financial advisor, you're going to be more financially healthy than if you don't. And so there's going to be an increasing demand for the services of financial advisors. And that's the link back to professionalism. If more people are going to be demanding and wanting to use financial advice services, then they should expect appropriate standards. They should know what they're getting when they walk in the door. And that's the link as we see it. So maybe as well, only 1/3 of Canadians have a workplace pension today. 2/3 do not. So again, they're going to have to become self-reliant. These are major challenges for the broader public and ones that we haven't really debated very publicly today.
Very interesting trends. How about challenges for the advisors themselves?
Well, always dealing with the new product, new technology. We did a survey recently with our members, asking them, you know, what do they see as the challenging issues for them over the next 5 years. And one of the big issues was the whole area of technology, and probably social media thrown in there as well. How do I use technology to, you know, advance my business practice? How do I use technology to inform and work with my clients? You know, where does social media come in? How do I use that to work with my clients? So these are challenges that they have. As well, products like disability insurance, long-term care insurance, they're identifying those as products that are going to become much more commonplace in their view in the future. And if you think of the health care cost comment I just made, and long-term care insurance, if you want, I mean, those are related issues. If I'm living a lot longer, how am I going to pay for those health care costs, especially if the government's not going to do that?
Now, if I think about the younger generation, the millennials, you know, they spend their time, you know, on these kinds of things. The last thing that they're really thinking about is investments and financial planning. You know, it's gee, you got to get the job. Gee, do I buy the house? Maybe the student loan. Maybe that's the extent of their thinking. But planning,
right?
You know,
right. Can I talk about the Gen Xers, Gen Ys for a moment? Because one of the things we're concerned about as an association is how do we succeed from the current cohort of financial advisors to the new financial advisors? How do we bring in those Gen Xers and Gen Yers? And so, it's funny, but this is, an iPhone, not, could be a BlackBerry, I guess, as well, but, my thinking was, and I'm not a Gen Xer or Gen Yer, no surprise there, was that, that's where they want to be. They want electronic communications. They want to take their designation programs online. They want to be 24/7 in terms of the way they conduct themselves. Well, we've done some surveys of young advisors, so those are the Gen Xers and Gen Yers.
Yep.
And what we found is the opposite. Now, I don't know if that's a test, a legitimate test or what. We're going to have to do more focus testing for sure to figure this out. But they're saying we still want to sort of connect eyeball to eyeball with our colleagues. It's not just good enough for me to be texting my financial advisor colleagues, 30-somethings back and forth, 20-somethings back and forth. I actually want to be sitting in a professional environment with them, learning together, understanding together, doing case studies together, and learning, what would you do, and what would you do, and learning from the experts at the same time. So this is very informing for me because, again, I made this presumption that, they're all kind of on the iPhones and the BlackBerries and so forth. I don't know if that's necessarily true. So we're all learning as we go along here.
It's also an interesting thing because people who are financial advisors might be self-selecting themselves and are going into the business because they crave the interpersonal relationships that perhaps the greater population of millennials
Absolutely. You could be right because there's no doubt it's a relationship business. And so that could clearly be why this very modest kind of focus testing we've done is giving us that early result.
Yeah, very interesting. So here you are, you're the president and CEO of the association. For you, what does success look like?
Well, success from my point of view would be assisting Canadians in becoming much more financially literate, much more financially savvy. I was asked by the federal government a few years back to sit on the National Task Force on Financial Literacy. We went across the country. We talked to Canadians about their financial literacy. It's a huge challenge. It's a huge problem. 50% of Canadians are challenged by simple numerical equations and numbers and so forth. And there's also even a reading literacy issue as well. So if you don't have basic literacy, then it's a real challenge to have good financial literacy. So that's where we need to focus our time. Plain language contracts. An individual gets a prospectus and it's 60 pages long. Well, they're not going to read it. And so what's really significant there? What is it that I really need to know? How can you as a financial advisor help me explain this to my clients? And how can we, as an association of financial advisors, help them do that more effectively? So for me, that would be a huge win, helping Canadians understand the need to be more financially literate, the need to become more financially independent, and to actually see evidence that that's occurring.
Fantastic, Greg. Thanks for coming on the show, and thank you for joining us on Professionally Speaking TV. If you want to learn more about Advocis, go to www.advocis.ca, and all kinds of resources there. Fascinating site. If you want to watch more of our show, go to www.professionallyspeakingtv.com. We've got 150 plus great episodes. And finally, if you do want to make a difference, first do it professionally. See you next week.